The Galactic Institute of Creative Arts stood as a testament to humanity's newest role in the cosmic community, not as conquerors or subjects, but as creators. Its crystalline spires reached toward the twin moons of New Terra, catching and refracting the sunset in ways that turned the entire campus into a living kaleidoscope. Within one of its many studios, Raven Blackwood adjusted the lighting for his evening advanced painting class, his dark hair tied back loosely as he prepared for another session of teaching alien species about human artistic expression. At 32, Raven had already made a name for himself in both human and extraterrestrial art circles. His unique ability to bridge the gap between species through art had earned him this coveted position, though lately, he'd begun to feel the weight of being one of the few humans in such a prestigious institution. The familiar chime signaled the arrival of his students. They filed in one by one, a meridian with crystalline skin that sparkled like diamonds, two void walkers whose shadows seemed to move independently of their bodies, and a handful of other species from across the galaxy. But it was the last student who caught his attention and made his breath catch in his throat. She moved like liquid starlight, her skin a deep indigo that seemed to pulse with its own inner luminescence. Her hair, a cascade of what appeared to be living aurora borealis, flowed behind her as if suspended in zero gravity. A celestial, one of the most ancient and mysterious species in the known universe. "Professor Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones typical of her species. "I am Zara Nelvith. I hope you don't mind my late addition to your class." Raven managed to maintain his professional composure despite his surprise. Celestials rarely interacted with younger species, let alone sought to learn from them. "Welcome, Miss Nelvith. Please, find any open easel." As the class began, Raven couldn't help but notice how Zara approached her canvas differently from his other students. While they all used traditional tools, brushes, paints, charcoal, she seemed to be pulling color directly from the air, her fingertips leaving trails of stardust that somehow adhered to the canvas. "Today, we're exploring emotional expression through color theory," Raven announced, walking between the easels. "In human art, we often associate colors with specific emotions. Red for passion or anger, blue for sadness or serenity, yellow for joy or energy. But I'm curious, how do your species perceive color and emotion?" The discussion that followed was fascinating, with each species offering their unique perspective. The meridian saw emotions as refractions of light, while the void walkers perceived them as varying densities of shadow. But when he reached Zara's easel, he stopped short. Her canvas was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The colors she'd created weren't just pigments, they were living things, swirling and pulsing with what appeared to be actual emotions. Looking at certain parts of the painting made him feel joy so intense his eyes welled up with tears, while other sections filled him with a profound sense of longing. "Miss Nelvith," he said quietly, "this is extraordinary. But I believe the assignment was to use traditional human painting techniques?" Zara turned those cosmic eyes to him, and for a moment, Raven felt like he was falling into a field of stars. Is it not more interesting to see how different techniques can merge to create something new? After all, isn't that why humanity joined the galactic community, to share and grow beyond traditional boundaries? Her words carried a weight that seemed to go beyond simple art theory, and Raven found himself nodding slowly. "You make an excellent point. Perhaps we can all learn something from this approach." As the class continued, Raven noticed how the other students began incorporating elements of each other's techniques into their work. The Meridian tried using traditional brushes, while one of the Void Walkers experimented with color for the first time. The studio became a laboratory of artistic fusion, with Zara's work serving as a catalyst for innovation. Near the end of the class, as students began cleaning their workspaces, Zara approached his desk. "Professor, I wonder if you might consider offering private lessons? There are aspects of human creativity I find intriguing." Raven hesitated. Private lessons weren't unusual, but something about Zara's request felt different. There was an intensity in her gaze that suggested she was seeking more than just artistic instruction. "I'd need to know more about your goals, Miss Nelvith. Celestials aren't typically interested in human art forms." "Perhaps that's precisely why we should explore them," she replied, her aurora hair shifting through spectrums of color he'd never seen before. "My people have created art for millions of years, yet we've become stagnant. There's something raw and vital in human creativity that we've lost. Something I'd like to understand better." Before Raven could respond, a shadow fell across his desk. Looking up, he found himself face to face with Director Voss, the Institute's stern Arcturian administrator. "Professor Blackwood, a moment of your time?" The director's four eyes fixed briefly on Zara before returning to Raven. "Alone, if you please." Zara inclined her head gracefully. "Of course. Professor, I'll await your decision about the private lessons." She glided from the room, leaving behind a faint trail of stellar essence that slowly faded like morning mist. Director Voss waited until the door closed before speaking. "Professor, are you aware of who that student is?" "A celestial named Zara Nelvith," Raven replied, beginning to suspect there was more to his new student than he realized. "She is the daughter of the Celestial High Council's chief arbitrator," Voss said, his tone grave. "Her presence here is politically significant and potentially problematic." Raven felt a chill run down his spine. The Celestial High Council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a governing body, and their chief arbitrator was essentially the supreme judge of all known space. Why would someone of her position want to study human art? "That, Professor Blackwood, is exactly what concerns us," Voss replied. "I advise extreme caution in your interactions with her. The relationship between humans and celestials is delicate at best. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings to arise." After Voss left, Raven sat alone in the darkening studio, staring at Zara's canvas. The emotions it had captured were still active, still swirling in their cosmic dance. As he watched, he could have sworn new colors emerged, ones that spoke of curiosity, attraction, and something else, something that felt dangerously like destiny. He knew he should decline her request for private lessons. It was the safe choice, the professional choice. But as he reached out to touch the canvas, feeling the energy of her creation pulse beneath his fingers, he realized he'd already made his decision. Some art, after all, was worth the risk. The private studio at the top of the Institute's tallest spire was Raven's sanctuary. Here, far above the bustle of campus life, the entire galaxy seemed to stretch out before him through the panoramic windows. Tonight, however, his attention wasn't on the spectacular view of New Terra's cityscape or the dance of its twin moons. Instead, he found himself completely captivated by the way Zara Nelvith's aurora hair reflected in the easel's polished surface. "You're distracted, Professor," she said, not looking up from her work. Her fingers danced above the canvas, weaving starlight into shapes that shouldn't have been possible in three-dimensional space. "Seeing you manipulate quantum elements as if they were simple pigments would distract any human," he replied, trying to maintain a professional distance despite the magnetic pull he felt toward her. 3 weeks of private lessons had done nothing to diminish the effect she had on him. Zara paused in her work, her cosmic eyes finding his. "Is that all that distracts you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Raven cleared his throat and moved closer to examine her work. "Your technique is evolving. You're beginning to blend traditional brush strokes with your natural abilities in ways I've never seen before." "I had an excellent teacher," she said, her voice carrying those harmonic undertones that made his skin tingle. "Though I wonder if you truly understand what you've taught me." "What do you mean?" Zara stood, her movement causing ripples in the fabric of space around her, a reminder that celestials weren't bound by the same physical laws as humans. "My people have created art for millions of years, but we lost something essential along the way. We became so focused on perfection, on technical mastery, that we forgot about this. She reached out and took his hand, pressing it to her canvas. The moment his skin made contact, emotions flooded through him, not just simple feelings, but complex symphonies of sensation. Joy intertwined with melancholy, hope dancing with fear, and underneath it all, a burning desire that took his breath away. "This is what you've taught me, Raven," she said softly, using his first name for the first time. "The courage to feel deeply, to create from the heart rather than just the mind. My people had forgotten that art isn't about perfection, it's about connection." Raven became acutely aware of her hand still holding his against the canvas, of how the starlight in her skin pulsed in rhythm with his quickening heartbeat. "Zara, we shouldn't." "Why not?" she challenged, stepping closer. "Because of what others might think. Because of who my father is. Because humans and celestials aren't supposed to form these kinds of connections?" "All of the above," he admitted, though he didn't pull away. "Director Voss has made it clear that any misconduct could have serious political implications." Zara's laugh was like wind chimes in a stellar breeze. "Misconduct? Is that what they're calling it when two beings from different species dare to feel something real? Tell me, Professor, isn't art about breaking boundaries? About challenging preconceptions?" Before Raven could respond, a soft chime filled the studio, the warning signal that someone was approaching. They separated quickly, Zara returning to her easel while Raven moved to his desk, his heart pounding. The door slid open to reveal a tall, imposing figure that seemed to be made of living constellation patterns. The temperature in the studio dropped several degrees, and the very air seemed to crackle with ancient power. "Father," Zara said, her voice carefully neutral. High Arbitrator Nelvitha's presence filled the room like a supernova contained in humanoid form. His eyes, swirling pools of cosmic energy, fixed on Raven. "So, this is the human who has captured my daughter's interest." Raven bowed deeply, remembering the complex protocols for addressing celestial nobility. "High Arbitrator, I am honored by your presence." "Are you?" The ancient being moved through the studio, examining the artwork displayed on the walls. "I wonder if you understand the honor, or the danger, of teaching a celestial of my daughter's standing." "Father, please," Zara interjected. "Professor Blackwood is simply teaching me human artistic techniques. There's no need for threats. Isn't there?" The High Arbitrator picked up one of Raven's personal sketches, a study of Zara he'd done from memory, capturing the way her aurora hair moved in zero gravity. "These private lessons have produced some interesting results. The Council is concerned about the influence human emotions might have on our next generation of leaders." "With all due respect, High Arbitrator," Raven said, finding his courage, "art without emotion is merely technique. Your daughter has shown remarkable insight into the connection between feeling and creation." The High Arbitrator's form shifted, stars within his body rearranging themselves into new patterns. "Yes, she has. That's precisely what concerns us." He turned to Zara. "The Council has decided. You will return home immediately. Your experiment with human art has gone far enough." "I refuse." Zara's voice carried a power Raven had never heard before, and her hair blazed with colors that hurt his eyes to look at. "I am not a child to be ordered about, Father. What I'm learning here is valuable, not just for me, but for our people." "You would defy the Council? Your own father? For what? These primitive teachings? This human?" "For the truth," Zara replied, moving to stand beside Raven. "Our people have isolated ourselves for too long, wrapped in our own perceived superiority. We've forgotten how to feel, how to truly create. Look at this." She gestured to her canvas, and the emotions contained within burst forth, filling the room with visible manifestations of feeling. Joy sparkled like diamond dust in the air, passion burned in ribbons of crimson energy, and love, pure, unfiltered love, radiated in waves that made even the High Arbitrator take a step back. This is what humans have reminded me we can do, Zara continued. Not just create beautiful things, but create things that make others feel. That connect us across the vastness of space and the boundaries of species. The High Arbitrator was silent for a long moment, his cosmic form swirling with unreadable emotions. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of eons. You understand that if you continue down this path, there will be consequences. The Council will not look kindly on such connection. Then perhaps it's time for the Council to evolve, Zara replied firmly. As we all must. After her father left, the studio remained charged with residual energy. Raven turned to Zara, his mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. You shouldn't have defied him for me. Zara reached up, her luminescent fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I didn't do it just for you. I did it for art, for truth, for the future of both our species. But yes, you are part of it. Her touch left trails of stardust on his skin. You've shown me that the greatest masterpieces come from the heart, even when, especially when, they break all the rules. As she drew him closer, their shadows emerging on the studio floor, Raven knew they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But looking into her cosmic eyes, feeling the pulse of her stellar essence synchronizing with his heartbeat, he realized that some boundaries were meant to be broken, some rules meant to be defied. The twin moons of New Terra cast their light through the studio windows, illuminating two figures from different worlds, brought together by art but bound by something far deeper. And on Zara's canvas, emotions continued to swirl and dance, telling a story as old as the stars themselves. The news spread through the Galactic Institute of Creative Arts like a quantum wave collapse, instantaneous and impossible to ignore. Holographic displays throughout the campus flickered with breaking news. Celestial High Council denounces cross-species relationships. The underlying message was clear to everyone, even if names weren't mentioned. Raven stood in his classroom, now half empty as several students had withdrawn following the controversy. The few who remained watched him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The Meridian students' crystalline skin reflected the tension in the room, fracturing light into anxiety-tinged patterns, while the Void Walker's shadows seemed more agitated than usual. Today's lesson will continue as planned, Raven announced, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. We're exploring the concept of light and shadow in emotional expression. As he began the lecture, the door slid open. Zara entered, her aurora hair subdued but still breathtaking, moving with the same ethereal grace that had first captured his attention. The remaining students whispered among themselves, some in awe, others in judgment. Miss Nelvith, Raven acknowledged professionally, though his heart raced at her presence. Please take your station. She settled at her easel, and for a moment, the class proceeded normally. But the peace was short-lived. Director Voss burst into the room, flanked by two enforcement officers, their metallic uniforms marking them as agents of the Interstellar Academic Board. Professor Blackwood, Voss's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme agitation in Arcturians. Your presence is required immediately in the board chamber. Raven set down his teaching materials. We're in the middle of a lesson, Director. This is not a request. The enforcement officers moved to flank him. Miss Nelvith, you will accompany us as well. The students watched in stunned silence as their professor and fellow student were escorted from the room. As they walked through the crystalline corridors, whispers and stares followed them like persistent shadows. The board chamber was a vast amphitheater, its walls lined with representatives from various species. At the center stood a holographic projection of the Celestial High Council, their cosmic forms towering and intimidating even in this virtual format. High Arbitrator Nelvitha's constellation pattern body pulsed with barely contained anger. Professor Blackwood, you stand accused of inappropriate conduct with a celestial student, of corrupting our ancient artistic traditions, and of inciting cultural instability. That's absurd, Zara interjected, her voice carrying harmonics of defiance. Professor Blackwood has done nothing but teach with passion and integrity. If our traditions are so fragile that they can be corrupted by exposure to new ideas, perhaps they need to evolve. Silence, her father commanded, but the stars within his form flickered uncertainly. You are here only as evidence of his misconduct. Raven stepped forward. With respect, High Arbitrator, your daughter is not evidence. She is an artist of extraordinary talent who has chosen to explore new forms of expression. If that threatens you, perhaps the problem lies not with her choices, but with your fear of change. Gasps echoed through the chamber. No human had ever dared to speak so boldly to a member of the High Council. The air crackled with tension, and for a moment, Raven thought he might be atomized on the spot. Instead, another council member spoke, an ancient celestial whose form resembled a spiral galaxy in motion. High Arbitrator, perhaps we should consider the larger implications. The girl's work has attracted attention throughout the artistic community. There are those who see it as a bridge between our peoples. A bridge that could collapse catastrophically, another council member countered. The mixing of celestial and human artistic techniques could have unforeseen consequences. Our art is not merely aesthetic, it manipulates the fundamental forces of reality. Exactly. Zara moved to stand beside Raven, her presence charging the air with stellar energy. That's precisely why this fusion is so important. Humans understand something we've forgotten, that art isn't just about power or technique. It's about connection, about sharing experiences across the vast gulfs that separate us. To demonstrate, she raised her hands. The air around her began to shimmer, and suddenly the chamber was filled with living art, not just celestial energy patterns, but paintings that combined human emotional expression with cosmic power. Images of love, hope, fear, and triumph danced through the air, telling stories that transcended species and culture. The board members and council representatives found themselves immersed in a gallery of impossible beauty, human brush strokes woven with stellar essence, earth pigments dancing with quantum particles. Each piece spoke of the possibility that lay in unity rather than division. This is what Professor Blackwood taught me, Zara continued, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the chamber. Not just technique, but courage. The courage to feel deeply, to express truly, to reach across boundaries that others claim cannot be crossed. The display was magnificent, but Raven could see the toll it was taking on her. Maintaining such complex artistic manifestations strained even celestial abilities. He stepped closer, offering his support, and felt her energy synchronize with his presence. High Arbitrator Nelvitha's form roiled with conflicting emotions. Daughter, you cannot expect us to abandon millions of years of tradition for this. I don't ask you to abandon anything, Father, Zara replied. I ask only that you open yourself to new possibilities. Isn't that what art is meant to do? To show us new ways of seeing, of feeling, of being? The chamber fell silent as her words resonated through the space. The art continued to swirl around them, human and celestial elements merging and separating in an endless dance of possibility. Finally, Director Voss stepped forward. The board must deliberate on this matter. Until we reach a decision, both Professor Blackwood and Miss Nelvith are suspended from all institute activities. As they left the chamber, Raven felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. In the corridor, Zara swayed slightly, drained from her artistic display. He caught her arm, supporting her. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, he murmured. Perhaps both, she replied with a weak smile. But I meant every word. They need to understand that art isn't just about preserving what was, it's about discovering what could be. They walked together through the now empty halls of the Institute, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Through the crystal walls, they could see the twin moons rising, casting their light across a campus that suddenly felt more like a battlefield than a place of learning. What happens now? Raven asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Zara's aurora hair shimmered with determination. Now, we prove them wrong. We show them that the greatest masterpieces arise not from isolation, but from connection. That love, between species, between cultures, between hearts, is the most powerful art of all. As they reached the entrance, they found a small group waiting for them, the Meridian student, the Void Walkers, and several others who had stayed in Raven's class. Each held a piece of art that combined their native techniques with human elements. "We stand with you," the Meridian said, their crystalline form refracting light into a rainbow of solidarity. "Your teachings have shown us all new ways to express ourselves." Looking at these students, at their art, at Zara's unwavering presence beside him, Raven realized that what had begun as a simple art class had become something far more significant, a movement that could change the very fabric of galactic society. The twin moons cast their light over the scene, illuminating a moment of choice, a canvas waiting to be filled with whatever they dared to create next. The underground studio pulsed with creative energy. Located in the forgotten industrial district of New Terra, the abandoned warehouse had become a sanctuary for artists who dared to defy the established order. Raven watched as students from a dozen different species worked together, sharing techniques that would have been forbidden at the Institute. The Meridian student, who now preferred to be called Prism, was teaching a group of young humans how to infuse their paintings with crystalline resonance. Nearby, the Void Walkers demonstrated their shadow-weaving techniques to fascinated Jovian light beings. But the true centerpiece was Zara, her aurora hair blazing as she guided everyone in combining their native artistic expressions with others. "The council never expected this," Raven said softly, standing beside her as they observed their growing movement. "They thought suspending us would end it." Zara's cosmic eyes sparkled with amusement. "The council has forgotten a fundamental truth about art, trying to contain it only makes it spread faster." She gestured to the walls around them, covered in works that defied traditional boundaries. "Every piece here is an act of revolution." The past month had seen their small group of loyal students grow into something much larger. Artists from across the galaxy had begun seeking them out, drawn by rumors of a new artistic movement that combined techniques thought to be incompatible. Each new arrival brought their own unique perspective, adding another layer to their evolving fusion of styles. But success had brought increased scrutiny. Security drones frequently patrolled the area, and several students had reported being questioned by enforcement officers. The council's influence reached far, and they were clearly unsettled by this challenge to their artistic orthodoxy. A sudden commotion at the entrance drew their attention. One of their lookouts, a young Aquarian with bioluminescent skin, rushed in. "Enforcement vessels incoming. At least 3 cruisers." The studio erupted into controlled chaos as students began securing their work. They had drilled for this, knowing it was only a matter of time before authorities found them. Raven helped coordinate the evacuation, making sure their most vulnerable students got out first through the secret tunnels they'd prepared. "Zara, you need to go," he urged, turning to find her still calmly working on a massive canvas. "Your father will use any excuse to." "To what?" she challenged, her fingers dancing across the surface, weaving starlight with earth pigments. "To prove he was right about humans being a corrupting influence?" "I won't run, Raven. This piece needs to be finished." The walls shuddered as tractor beams locked onto the building. Through the high windows, they could see the sleek forms of enforcement cruisers hovering above them, their weapons primed but not yet firing. "This is the Interstellar Academic Board," a voice boomed through the emergency broadcast system. "You are engaged in unauthorized artistic activities. Surrender immediately or face consequences." Most of the students had evacuated, but a core group remained, gathering around Raven and Zara. Prism's crystalline form refracted the tension in the room into brilliant patterns, while the Void Walker's shadows coalesced into protective barriers around the group. "Professor," one of the human students spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear visible on her face, "what should we do?" Before Raven could respond, the main doors burst open. Enforcement officers poured in, their uniform designs representing various species but all carrying the same authority. Behind them came Director Voss, his 4 eyes scanning the studio with a mixture of disapproval and something else. Was that uncertainty? "This ends now," he declared, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Professor Blackwood, you and your accomplices will cease these illegal activities immediately." Zara stepped forward, her form radiating stellar power. "Illegal? We're creating art, Director. Since when did that become a crime?" "Since it began threatening the stability of our society," a new voice answered. High Arbitrator Nelvith materialized in the center of the room, his constellation form towering over everyone. "Daughter, you disappoint me. I gave you every opportunity to return to our ways." "Your ways," she corrected, gesturing to the art-covered walls. "Look around you, Father. Look at what we've created here. Not just art, but understanding. Connection. Unity." "I see chaos," he replied, but his cosmic eyes lingered on the work surrounding them. Dangerous mixing of techniques that were meant to remain separate. Raven moved to stand beside Zara. "Why? Why must they remain separate? The universe itself is a canvas of infinite possibilities. Why shouldn't our art reflect that?" "Because..." The High Arbitrator began, but for the first time, he seemed uncertain. Zara seized the moment. With a gesture, she brought her latest work to life. The massive canvas began to pulse with energy, not just celestial power but something new, a harmony of techniques from every species present. Images flowed across its surface, a human child sharing dreams with a void walker, a meridian teaching crystal weaving to a group of celestial youngsters, stories of love and loss and hope that transcended species. "This is what you fear?" she asked softly. "This beauty? This unity? Or do you fear that it proves everything you believed about keeping our art separate was wrong?" The studio fell silent as the art spoke for itself. Even the enforcement officers seemed transfixed by the display. Director Voss stepped closer to one of the paintings, his 4 eyes wide with wonder. "It's remarkable," he admitted quietly. "The techniques, they don't just coexist, they enhance each other. Create something entirely new." High Arbitrator Nelvitha's form shifted, stars rearranging themselves as he absorbed the scene. "You truly believe this is the future of art?" he asked his daughter. "I believe it's already here," she replied, taking Raven's hand. "The only question is whether you'll continue fighting it or help us guide it." The ancient celestial was silent for a long moment, his cosmic essence swirling with conflicting emotions. Finally, he turned to the enforcement officers. "Stand down." "Sir?" one of them questioned. "I said stand down." He moved through the studio, examining each piece carefully. Perhaps we have been too rigid in our thinking. Art, after all, has always been about evolution, about finding new ways to express the inexpressible." Relief flooded through the room, but Raven knew this wasn't over. One battle might have been won, but the war for acceptance was far from finished. Still, looking at Zara's radiant face, feeling the energy of their combined artistic expression filling the space, he knew they had crossed a crucial threshold. The revolution they had started with paint and starlight was spreading, one canvas at a time, rewriting the rules of what was possible when hearts and minds opened to new possibilities. The grand exhibition hall of the Galactic Institute of Creative Arts had never seen anything like this. Its crystalline walls, usually pristine and orderly, now pulsed with living art from 100 different worlds. The traditional segregated galleries had been transformed into a single, flowing space where techniques and traditions merged freely. Raven stood at the entrance, barely recognizing the institution that had once suspended him. 6 months had passed since the confrontation in the underground studio, 6 months of intense negotiation, demonstration, and gradual acceptance. Now, on the opening night of the first cross-species art exhibition, he could hardly believe how far they'd come. Nervous? Zara asked, appearing beside him in a gown that seemed woven from actual nebulae. Her aurora hair cascaded freely, no longer subdued but blazing with confident light. Terrified, he admitted with a smile. The entire artistic community of the known galaxy will be here tonight. The High Council, the Academic Board, critics from every major species. Good, she said, taking his hand. Let them come. Let them see what happens when we stop fearing connection and start embracing it. The exhibition had been Zara's idea, a grand showcase of the new artistic movement they'd sparked. But instead of simply displaying finished works, they had turned the entire hall into an interactive space where artists could create in real time, collaborating across species boundaries. The first guests began arriving, and the hall quickly filled with a diverse crowd of beings from across the galaxy. Prism, now officially reinstated as a teaching assistant, guided a group of celestial visitors through a display of crystal shadow art they'd developed with the Void Walkers. Nearby, human students demonstrated how traditional Earth paintings could be enhanced with stellar essence, their canvases glowing with otherworldly light. Director Voss approached them, his 4 eyes bright with excitement. Professor Blackwood, Miss Nelvith, you've outdone yourselves. The board is impressed. High praise indeed, Raven replied diplomatically, remembering their previous confrontations. More than praise, Voss continued. We're prepared to officially recognize cross-species artistic studies as a formal discipline. With you two as its founding directors, if you're interested. Before they could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. High Arbitrator Nelvith had arrived, accompanied by the full Celestial Council. Their cosmic forms filled the space with ancient power, but tonight they seemed more curious than imposing. Daughter, the High Arbitrator said, approaching Zara. Your movement has caused quite a stir in the artistic community. That was the intention, Father, she replied calmly. Art should stir things up occasionally. It keeps us from becoming stagnant. The ghost of a smile flickered across his constellation face. Indeed. The Council has been reviewing our position on artistic segregation. Perhaps it is time for some changes. As if to emphasize his point, he gestured to the exhibition's centerpiece, a massive collaborative work that dominated the main gallery. It had been created by artists from every known species, each contributing their unique techniques to form something entirely new. The piece seemed alive, shifting and evolving as viewers approached, responding to their emotions and reflecting them back in ways that transcended individual understanding. Beautiful, isn't it? Zara said softly. The way everything flows together, each part enhancing the others instead of competing with them. Like the universe itself. Like love, Raven added, squeezing her hand. The High Arbitrator's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. You two never did make things easy, did you? A human art professor and a celestial aristocrat, defying convention, starting a revolution. Someone had to, Zara replied. The old boundaries were holding us all back, keeping us from seeing the full spectrum of what art could be. What we could be. As if in response to her words, the exhibition suddenly came alive with spontaneous creation. Artists began to work together, inspired by the moment. A Void Walker's shadows danced with human watercolors. Meridian crystal light merged with celestial star essence. The barriers between techniques, between species, between traditions melted away in a surge of pure creative energy. Raven watched in awe as the hall transformed into a living canvas, every being contributing to a massive, unplanned collaboration. This was what they had dreamed of, not just art without boundaries, but understanding without limits. The Council formally recognizes and approves this new direction in galactic art, High Arbitrator Nelvith announced, his voice carrying through the hall. Furthermore, we propose the establishment of a new creative exchange program, to facilitate the sharing of artistic knowledge between all species. The announcement was met with jubilant celebration. Artists who had been working in secret could now pursue their visions openly. Students who had feared expressing themselves could now explore freely. The revolution they had started with a simple art class had blossomed into something that would change the creative landscape of the galaxy forever. Later that night, as the celebrations continued around them, Raven and Zara slipped away to his old private studio at the top of the spire. The twin moons of New Terra painted the sky in silver light, a natural artwork all its own. "Do you remember our first private lesson here?" Zara asked, moving to the easel that still held the canvas from that day. "How could I forget? You turned everything I thought I knew about art upside down." She laughed, the sound like stellar wind through cosmic strings. "And you showed me that sometimes the most powerful art comes from the heart rather than the stars." She touched the canvas, and their old work came alive, showing the moment they first began to understand each other. "We still have so much to learn," Raven said, watching the play of emotions across the canvas. "So many new techniques to discover, new combinations to explore." "That's the beauty of it," Zara replied, turning to face him. Her cosmic eyes held the light of infinite possibilities. "Art, like love, has no final destination. It's about the journey, about growing and evolving together." As they stood there, silhouetted against the starlit sky, their shadows merged into one on the studio floor. Below them, the exhibition continued, a testament to what could happen when barriers fell and hearts opened. And on every canvas, in every sculpture, in every piece of living art, there was a simple message. The greatest masterpieces arise not from isolation, but from connection. Not from fear, but from love. Not from tradition alone, but from the courage to imagine something new. The twin moons cast their light over the scene, illuminating not just an art exhibition, but the dawn of a new era, one where creativity knew no bounds, where love recognized no barriers, and where the canvas of possibility stretched as far as the stars themselves.